And now, without further ado, I just would reintroduce Ron, our president-elect, and Catherine, where did she go? Anyway, she's here. And then we're going to take a look at CCRCs of the future, how today's CCRC is evolving to meet tomorrow's needs, or is it? Both Ron and Catherine will draw upon their experiences as well as the ongoing research with state laws, recent legislative investigations, and proposed state statutes to examine new and independent roles and important roles for residents to play, both in governance and in financial accountability of continuing care and life care communities in the United States. This is going to be an interactive workshop, and it's going to involve all of us. So we invite you, as provider as well as resident, to join in and fasten your seatbelts and get ready to take a look at CCRCs in the future and for the future. And Ron and Catherine.
When I sat down and looked at the crowd this morning, can't hear?
Right. Lean in a little closer.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Can everybody hear now? Okay. Now we're good to go. When I looked at the crowd and I said to myself, yep, this is Sunday morning church, and they're not breaking down the doors. But in our society, we tend to measure things by numbers and size. And it reminds me of a movie a number of years ago. And for some of you who had the experience, it was called The Mouse Abroad. And mice can roar. One of the things that mice need to learn how to do if they're going to roar is they need to learn how to organize themselves so that they get hurt. And so I hope one of the side effects of what we do today in exchanging what the future might look like for CCRC is we can open the agenda and we can think outside the box. Ruth in particular likes the phrase that I used a couple of years ago, think out of the box. So there are no constraints on the agenda of how you think about CCRCs in the future. All of you are bright, and you have creative imaginations, and you have, above all, experience. One of the things that our president in the background in Virginia said one day that impressed me was, nobody knows more about CCRC life than the residents. So what we want to talk about is a perspective, and for those who may represent providers in this group, they likewise are going to face an agenda in the future that's going to require out-of-the-box thinking. The story that I would tell about Sunday morning, a friend of mine and I belonged to the same congregation that we were ushering on Sunday. I'm sure you will all recognize this. So as we ushered, we deliberately put people in places and seats in the congregation that they weren't usually assigned to. So we put, Mr. and Mrs. X usually sat in the left front, over in the mid-range to the right side, and we kept doing that. And the interesting experience that we had was they enabled us and helped us do it. So we had this mix from the usual of what happens when people came into that congregation and took a seat before worship on Sunday morning. Well, I think if you think a little bit about it, you can understand what happened. What happened was people were looking around, they were whispering to one another, they were doing all kinds of things. Well, to make a long story short, when the service was over and people were leaving and we were gathering in the back of the sanctuary, the pastor, who we both knew real well, said, "What in the world were you folks trying to do?" And he thought it was funny, and so did we. Well, we said there's a serious side to this. What we did was, we changed the format. And when we changed the format, people began to think differently. And they began to interact somewhat differently. And he said, with somewhat of a humorous frown on his face, he says, well, they weren't paying a whole lot of attention to me. And my colleague, who knew him very well, said, well, that's okay. He said, half the time they don't pay attention to you anyway. But it's a little story about what happens when you begin to depart from the usual ways of doing things. And while on the one hand it makes people uneasy, there is some unease to that. And in our particular case, it doesn't really matter whether you're a resident or whether you're a part of administration or provider. It faces us with unease. And we need to address that unease. What we need to do is to be able to learn how to talk about our anxiety, and we need to learn to be transparent and open and interactive with one another, because we have two major stakeholders, two major players. Well, if you're looking for an industry that is in the center of the storm of change, CCRCs is the place for you to look. It's no secret to those of us in this room that the recession of 2008 changed the rules of the game and has put us, both residents and providers, in a major paradigm shift about CCRC life in the future. If you don't like that change, I think you will like your relevance even less. The list of drivers to give us a start on maybe how we can get the mechanisms in our head working about what do you see as the future for CCRCs. Healthcare reform that will likely push the model of CCR living deeper into a healthcare model. Expanding the use of technology to address and adapt to the change. A shift from independent living to assisted living in current adaptations with a range of attendant adaptations that are going to need to happen. Growing utilization of home and community care. That's on the horizon, that's already emerging in the life of CCRC. Marketing and transparency. It seems like whenever you get into a conversation at the CCRC, ultimately the conversation sooner or later moves in that direction. Increased engagement of prospective and current residents in the planning and operation of facilities. And finally, the availability of capital for startup and expansion. That's what just a starting list that can stimulate our thinking about CCRC. A scriptural reflection, when I made these notes, occurred to me when Jesus talked about change in the Gospel of Mark. And one of the most famous that is quoted was, "You cannot put new wine in old wineskins." And I think that's apropos of where we're at in this industry and how the provider and the resident are going to have to look at the future. Another visual image that I would like to leave with you. I tried to find it. I had it in my office before I retired. And it was part of a training image that was used by Norfolk and Southern Railroad for their top management staff. And it hung in the office of one of those top operators of Norfolk and Southern Railroad. And here was the image. Try to fix this in your head if you think about it. Two horses strapped back to back, butt to butt, if you will put it frankly. So they were harnessed, one facing this way, the other facing that way. Out of their reach of their harness pull were huge bales of hay, which they could not reach, unless they turned around and worked together. They would start. I think that's an appropriate visual image as a part of the kind of thing, the kind of culture, the kind of atmosphere we're going to face in the future. It will not be an easy one because it is hard to get to the head. As we move through this transition of adaptation and change for the future, the best efforts of both residents and providers working together will need to occur in ways never before considered. Two recent examples of the facility in which I reside. A side note is that I retired in a community that 4 months, 3 months after my wife and I arrived, we went into bankruptcy. It was not anticipated. It came like what I described at the moment, historically, that someone hitting us on the back of the head with an axe handle. And if you've never been through one of these, you know, my advice is don't do it. You learn a lot. One of the things that I exchange with folks is, out of our experience, is that the soft stuff, and what I refer to, what I mean by the soft stuff, is what it does to people's heads and their emotions and their anxieties. We tend to be drawn to things like the bottom line. Well, it's a good subject. You can't get along without it. Nickels and dimes are important. But when you face issues like bankruptcy in a life care community, there's a lot of soft stuff going on that we're not paying a whole lot of attention to. And it is not positive soft stuff. Unless it is dealt with in some creative ways out of the future, it likely will bring some people down. So it's an issue we need to address. Two examples from experience of engagement in a different way. We have in our facility, and I'm sure you have a model similar to this, where residents and or their families can get together and discuss the health care issues and some of the in-house living issues that we face. One of the residents brought this up with the health care people on staff at the facility. She was on a scooter. The only way she can be mobile and reasonably independent is with a scooter. But she made this observation. You've all seen it. You probably know it. Fire bars are heavy monsters, very heavy monsters, and they are necessary. So she brought the question up, I can't even get into the public restroom space in this building because I can't get the door open. That was amazing to me. Had never been said before in any venue in this facility. 2 weeks later, the administration responded, and they put in an electronic push a button, the door will open. They did it both in the laboratories and all over the facility, and the places where garbage was disposed of, because you had to take your garbage to that spot, and you had it's the same door, the same issues involved. So it's an example of a little thing that was brought up in an exchange between the provider and the resident, and immediately we had a solution. Another family care resident meeting, and we're going to face more and more of this as the future moves forward. The second example was a conversation about admission of residents living with health care needs, and home health care was the response. It emerged in a mutual conversation in terms of the kind of adaptations that would be needed in the facility to accommodate that, so that this population group could find the service but could stay in an independent living apartment. Now, you can play that idea out quite a ways, and fairly soon you will find out that there are a lot of adaptations that are going to need to occur. So that's your job. Your job is to tell Catherine and I, what do you think about all of this? Now, you may not agree with all of the stimulating ideas that I gave you, but that's okay. I have a lot of people that don't agree with me. It starts with my wife. But we need to have the conversation. We need to have it in an atmosphere of respect, and we need to have it in an atmosphere of concern. So in our interactive exchange, we want your participation with ideas in the box or out of the box. And we want to capture those ideas ideas, and you can ask me questions about my ideas. But one of the things I think I would like us to start with is at your table, with your colleagues and your neighbors, pick up on the challenge. The challenge is to share with one another what you perceive as the future for the CCRC industry. So we'll give you a few minutes. Turn, talk to your neighbors. What do you see? Do you agree with some of the things I mentioned? Do you disagree with that? Or what, particularly, what are the new ideas that you might have? What do you perceive? What do you experience? What do you hear? What do you see? And it's amazing. As we found out with the doors at the Glebe in Virginia, how quickly that got solved and had never been raised before. Nobody ever thought about it before. Until the lady at the scooter said, I can't get in there. I have to go back to my apartment. I have to go to the bathroom. It's a major issue. So turn to your colleagues, have a conversation. Catherine will facilitate that and move around, and I will do some of that as well. And then we'll come back and we will ask you to share with us, and we'll try to capture it. So we'll hold more time to derive.
So you can see on the board here, I've listed starting concerns. So let's work table by table so that each of you come up with 3 or 4, big ideas, big concerns, and then let's go around and see if there is overlap between the tables. And then let's start refining our way down or up. Maybe we'll have more concerns after we talk. And see if at the end of our time together today, we can't come with 3 or 4 bullet ideas that the next year's work for NAPRA can focus on. Does that sound like a good way to start? So, at each of your tables, talk a little bit. We'll give you about, 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that to start with. And then I'll come back and start asking you to report out loud, and I'll put them on the paper. So what I'm going to do is come around to each table and share my microphone with you. And probably this, I don't know, Ron, are you going to be the writer this time? Or Ron, you be the writer and read? Okay, so I'll come back and write too. So let's start here at this table that's close to me so that I can do this the most easily. Who wants to be the reporter here?
I'm Will Boyer. We came up with 3 items. The first one has to do with refundability of entry fees. That's a long-standing item which has been a concern to NACA for many years. It's due to the fact that the Federal Accounting Standards Board has a rule, and I can't quote it exactly, but some here maybe you can, that essentially allows CCRCs to wait until the unit has been resold before they refund their entry fees. NACA has been developing some model laws which we hope can correct this, but we anticipate that it's going to take a few years for us to get those laws enacted by the various states. That's something I think we're going to have to live with for a while, even though we don't like it. The second one had to do with changes of contracts, particularly with charging for health features in the future. This one surprised me a little bit, but apparently several CCRCs are making arbitrary changes in their contract, going out and negotiating and acquiring health management organizations and other groups to come in to assist with health management. And in those cases, they are charging extra fees to the residents for those services, even though the original contract contract that provide for the CCRC to provide health services. I would imagine that in each state you would have to look at the legality of a change like that in your contract. And I do have one more. It has to do with resident representation on boards of directors. And the issue here is primarily the board making decisions that the residents are not aware of and may have concerns about. It gets back to the issue of transparency and openness that Ron Herring mentioned in his opening remarks.
Okay. Good. Move you on to the next. Ron, why don't you put that one up and I'll move to the next room. Say in red. Take pre-time. Okay, good. Let's go ahead. And if there's overlaps, don't hesitate to say, this is an overlap. We'll come back and star that, and then we'll get down to a small group probably at some point. Yes,
Hello?
you're there.
This does work. Yes, we have as many opinions as there are people at the table, so it's hard to report on anything per se. But we started off with the notion that the CCRCs were becoming more and more assisted living, high-end assisted living places, and really not geared to independent living. And this was a problem. Another issue that came up is that the residents essentially have very little say because they have no choice. What happens is that residents who come in put down a down payment that represents a large fraction of their wealth. And they are not in a position to really make their voice heard by saying, I'll move if something doesn't happen, unless they have the capability of getting that money back so that they can then use it to move elsewhere. And in many communities, you do not get your money back until the unit is sold. Now that doesn't have to be, but that's the way it is in many places. And that certainly affects the balance of power between management and the residents. It's hard to force change if you really don't have a choice.
Those other three all blend into what
Use the
are,
mic.
All three of those blend into what concerns people at the table. The second one is one thing my personal opinion is that until the operating corporations get off the nursing home administrator license mandatory thinking to be a member of the operation and have a more balanced, open background commercially or something, you have a major issue in talking with them because ours don't know how to deal with independent living, active residents, and their training has just never been in those personality skills. And that is a long-term problem. Nursing home administrators serve a great purpose when you're in the bed and sick, but no, there's no other skills. And that comes to how the heck you accomplish any of this.
You know, it strikes me that certainly many of these issues overlap in terms of communication style and, or lack of communication style. And so I suppose maybe what I'm tending to write on the boards, and you can tell me if I'm doing it wrong, is specific, you know, focus items rather than the bigger culture issues, which are certainly important, but harder to change. Sometimes you can change something like, you know, representation on boards. It's harder to change attitudes without representation on boards, would be my example. Okay, let's go to this table. We'll see if we have more to add.
I think we tried to find some things that we thought would be different from what other tables had. We talked a good deal about preparing for the baby boomers and all the things that would bring with it, especially changes, their interest in changes in dining services, dining dress, much more technology for all of the residents to be available. We were also concerned about the apparent change of transferring more risk to the residents, and wondering if perhaps industry-wide there should be some initiatives toward group risk management. And the other question that we raised is, are we going to see a decline in the number of single-site CCRCs and more consolidation in the future?
The first thing our table recognized was that we come from different arrangements of our CCRCs, and so we told each other whether we were in a not-for-profit or a profit, and whether we were in a life care or a fee-for-service CCRCs, and we had quite a bit of diversity around the table, and that led us to the conclusion that from the point of view of the new generation of people who are looking at CCRCs, it would be useful if there was some kind of standard or some kind of regularized way of analyzing the CCRC so that people knew what it was they were shopping for, what it was they were getting. We also, so that was the first thing. The second thing is that we, like the other tables, were concerned about governance. One of our table members mentioned that every nickel that a not-for-profit CCRC spends is given by the residents, and yet residents have really no legal authority to have any influence on what the management does with the money we pay for. The management owns it. And so we did have some discussion about resident members of governing boards, how they get there, whether they get there, and whether it's useful. And finally, we did have rather a long discussion about food and varieties of food plans and food service, and the perceived rigidity in some places regarding the kinds of food service that's given, and we noted that other places have a big variety to their food presentations, and everyone recognizes that food is a really important aspect of one's life and probably a very important marketing issue for the future.
Did I get the key ones there?
Are we still going to understand? If you're talking about the future, there's a lot of good input here about operating infrastructure, how the money is done, and all that. My suggestion, which we didn't get into very deeply at this table, but I think is interesting to everyone in the room, is that you're talking about the future, and we have, when we talk about the future, you're talking about people who are, what, in their 50s now? Or whatever, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're going to be arriving on site, and they're going to bring some other interests into these CCRCs that we don't see much of right now. One, for example, is we have in Tyler, Texas, communicating to the people who live there what's going on. We have calendars that are posted. We have notes put up on the wall. And there's so many different ways that we hear about it. I think the people in the future,
Let me ask you this. Will they have?
I just wonder if you think that the generation coming up will have fewer or more financial resources than we do. Financial resources.
Well, the opinion that's floating around is they will have fewer financial.
Yeah, I'd like to add to the baby boomer people, because we're beginning to get some of those in our community, and they have demands and expectations, and the demand that they get those what they expect. So marketing has to be very careful not to mislead. They still have it on our marketing that we have a tennis court. Well, actually, the tennis court is 1/3. Can't think of it. No, it's a game like tennis or badminton, but it's pickleball. That's it, pickleball. And 2/3 is a dog park now, because the tennis court was built in a place you should never have been built, and we have to keep it up. And where you have trails, and we do have trails through the woods, and we think they're fine, but the new people think, well, they're not paved, they're not manicured. They want everything beautifully manicured and to their wishes. They also want more space. We've got lots of people who want 2-bedroom dens, and if they're getting cottages, they all want to add a porch, or even some people want to add 2 rooms, and that's too much for the space we have. So their demands and expectations are bigger.
We just did a survey at our place, and the top thing on the athletic side was hiking and trails. And we have a very active group of residents who are working on trail building every single week. Not only on our place, but in the state national parks.
You begin to see the differences between what is going on in one CCRC versus what's going on in another. They're not all carbon copies.
We on the West Coast, we have a variety of people. This room is all Anglo, all of us are Anglos. In our CCRC, the Asians are saying, but we need in food service, we need to have white rice. We need rice. And if you have a Mexican population, you might need more ethnic stuff. And we're not doing that.
Last year in Denver, I went to the booth where the Leading Age has this continuing education program, what do they call it? Class or something, where they work with executive directors for a year, and they pick topics, and they write a term paper or a dissertation. And so I went up and said, I've heard knock around. I said, I'd like to know what part of your program deals with resident engagement. Could you give me a sample of a couple of papers that your graduates have written on how executive directors engage residents in the management of CCRCs? And you'd have thought I asked for the Pope to run off with the organist at St. Peter's. They said, well, I think one person did that 2 years ago, and I'll look into your thing. The culture of Leading Age does not foster what you're talking about. And that's one of the reasons we need to influence Leading Age to get with the program, because there are no good standards for executive directors, except for Mary Louise. Here are that was the unauthorized version. Here's the authorized version. We came up with three things. One is that clearly the changing culture of the community from independent living to assisted living due to natural attrition. And so what was a vital independent living unit, and people get older and they bring services in, and pretty soon your community is a different community than one you moved into. Number two, relationships, no representation on the board of directors, difficulty in getting financials, difficulty in establishing partnership between management and residents, and we've got some hardheads over this table who are in for-profits, and they say, we have, there's no board of directors to ask him to have a representative, and the point that I make to them is that what do for-profits want? They want their places filled. They want to sell their product. You cannot sell the product if the people using the product don't endorse the product. And I think we need to learn how to talk more directly to managers, owners, and CEOs of these corporations and say, look, if you want us to sell it, we've got to be a partner and understand it, and one of the things that we need to understand are the finances. Because when somebody moves into Aljoya or they move into Maryville, they say, Bob, Betty, what's the financial situation of this place? And if you can't answer that, they'll say, we'll look somewhere else. Number three, effective, this is written in Hebrew. I got it. It was my point. The third is, how do resident councils gather effective data from residents? That is, you can't advocate for the people who live where you live if you don't know where they are in their thinking, in their needs, in their attitudes, in their diet, in their mobility, with the woman and the scooter who can't get in through the door. Now usually, I don't want to say usually, but often that person is maybe frail or retiring, and I don't want to cause a stir. But we need a way to have her feel she can be heard. And this woman apparently was. So we had
retired dean of the School of Nursing at University of Washington, which is the premier school of nursing in the country. This guy had been a service. And she wrote the book on selecting a CCRC. And so when she moved into Mirabella, she called the executive director and said that he was kind of a prick. I may just put it bluntly. I think that's Presbyterian reform. No, that's not. And so she called him up and said, "I'd like you to come to my apartment and take out the garbage." And here's a guy, dapper, white shirt, nice tie, big, nursing home administrator, comes up. She's in a walker. She says, "Now, I'd like you to get the garbage out, carry the garbage out the door, down to the hall, open the door, turn on the light, put it down the chute with the walker." Well, you can't open the door, you can't turn on the light. I mean, you can't do all those things. And so guess what? They spend a lot of money retrofitting how you take out the garbage. And that's exactly the point that somebody made. You've got these nursing home administrators that don't know in their mouth. Thank you.
Where are you trying to go out that door?
All the doors are too heavy.
One of the things that we talked about, how leadership in a facility responds to residents. I can give you a very recent two-day ago example of what happened in our facility. Here's the story. They had therapy services at the facility that were contracted out several years ago when the facility opened. And everybody except the facility owners didn't like it. So after a couple of years, they got rid of that contracted service. And they hired their own staff. So they have a 3.5 FTE staff in the therapy department. These people turned out to be absolutely marvelous. You couldn't find anybody that said, even the hospital, one of the hospitals that is used, you couldn't find anybody that said this was one of the best therapy departments they've ever seen. Now the new executive director is under the pressure to eliminate a $200,000 a year loss in his fixed cost of the therapy department. So, as nature will have it, you go and you outsource that by contract, because those therapy people that are outsourced are paid when they do the work. The workforce that they have had is a fixed cost, and that's where the $200,000 deficit comes from. Now, all of this has a lot of logic to it. I mean, if you put your emotions aside and you operate only by the bottom line, it makes a lot of sense. You have to find a way, and the new CEO of the facility said that. I have to find a way to reduce a $200,000 deficit. What he failed to do was to engage the residents. And the grapevine, as most of you know, in a rural living situation, travels faster than the speed of the internet. And the word got out. And the meeting I went to 2 days ago before I came here was almost like the atmosphere of a mutiny, because the residents were not engaged in the conversation about something that the residents had earlier experienced as being poor therapy. Now, this is the soft stuff that I talk about. And administrators, directors, CEOs, call what you will, they have to learn how to work with people and engage people in the things that affect their lives. And if they take the position that I'm the boss, I'll tell you what to do, when, how long, etc. That's not going to work. Because most of the people in this room, I believe, are not the kind of people that like to see that happen to them. So we have a model of leadership that keeps being repeated over and over and over again. And I would commend the engagement meters to be able to manage that dynamic in a CCRC, as well as manage the bottom line. But it blew up in our face simply because they didn't engage the residents. The residents weren't angry at the issue. The residents were angry at the one man said to me as he walked out in his walker, they didn't respect me by talking to me about it, and I live here. There you have it. It's a living case study and what happens in the heads of administrators. And they're forced into bottom line positions. But you can't win bottom line with some of the soft stuff. The ability to communicate and respect people.
Ron, what is the protocol in resident meetings that's going for 3 hours about taking a break halfway through for the benefit of those who are resident?
I have a copy of it in my briefcase.
And actually, that does bring up a good point. Ruth asked us when we put this meeting together whether we wanted to try to have an official break or did we want to just let people come and go as they please. And I think, Ruth, we voted in favor of letting people come and go as they need to. And the restrooms, are they nearby?
I'd just like to dissent and say that the group has not been salted.
Too much time, and this was my unilateral decision. When you have to go to the bathroom, get water down the road here, not too far, bathrooms are close at hand. You just get up when you need to and then come back to us.
We'll make sure that we keep coming back and summarizing so you don't miss too much. But you've got a good point. There's also a limit to how much we can do as a communitarian approach. Okay, so we're kind of at a point now where we've identified, 25 different, concepts, both large and small, right? What I would suggest as a next step, and Ron can stop me if I'm going the wrong direction, the other thing that I look at as a law professor, as a lawyer, and as an advocate is what are the best mechanisms by which to address any issue? So, for example, are there ways in which we can do this through state legislation or state regulation? That's a challenge, as New Jersey's found out, right? Can we do this as an effort through state organizations of residents? Can we do this internally within our communities, each community generating its own leadership team within residents to take on the task at their own level? And I guess maybe what I would ask is, do we want to talk about which of these items are best for NACRA to be a part of, and where NACRA how can NACRA help residents in any of these efforts? So what if we took these 25 items and created a priority list of 5 for NACRA to work on over the next year and beyond? What if we did that as our next step? Does that sound like it might be productive at this point? Yes.
I do think that's a good idea to select a smaller number. But I would like to offer one other opportunity, if you will, to go forward. And that is, there are a number of organizations in the United States that establish standards which are used throughout the country. And I see no reason why NACRA could not be a focus on standards in the CCRC community. If we were to develop strong standards, perhaps in concert with others, focus on the CCRC community and promulgate them publicly, that might do a lot of good.
Very good, very good. So perhaps what you're suggesting is we ought to start identifying today partners for doing this. Okay, good. All right, so yes.
See, I don't want to go to the bathroom and miss something.
Okay.
Now you've got across there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets are very good points. I would propose we take a 5-minute break and go and browse those take our pens and let's put check marks by things we think NACRA needs to address, so we can both move and be productive, because that's what Ruth wants us to do, is move and be productive. But I've got to get up and move. So why don't we just go over there, and this will help us to refresh what everybody said. Can we just not get lost, don't go away, but just browse, and then quietly some people who like me are going to can do it.
So each person check 5. Yes, let's do that. Each person check 5 and again, the question is not what you think is the most important to you, but what you think is the most important for NACRA to work on in this next year and beyond. Okay? I think that's a great idea. Very good.
5 minutes over.
Okay, 5 minutes you can use. What I'll do is I've got one more color here, and you can also use pens and pencils, anything you want here.
I would suggest some of us can start marking rather than crowding the panel.
And the water is down as you go out here, turn right, and this is C2, and there's C3 and 4, and water's right there. The restroom, I am not clear.
Yes. Meeting agenda. And everything is very.
I did and they are taken so we can handle that. And depending on the time, whoever shows up, we can talk to them.
Okay. Okay, very good.
Okay, let's go ahead and everybody please sit down. We'll get started again. Okay, so we've got our 25 items of important things to think about for the future, and I have circled 7 that have received a lot of response, and that's not to say the others aren't important, just that there's greater consensus on these 7. I guess maybe I'm wondering if the next thing is to translate this into action items for NACRA specifically. So to review, representation on boards, the concern about change in the focus to assisted living, the desire for standardization within the industry, or by some measure by which there would be greater comparability. The concern about financial resources of future residents going to be lower, and that affecting the ability of people to come in, particularly to life care communities. The effect on culture of the leading age leadership. Leading Age is the organizational name that we're using for the people who train and organize and support the people who both own and operate CCRCs. And several people pointed out to me that that's very similar to the concern about training the leadership of owners and managers to be prepared for the future, to work with residents. And then finally, how to be effective in communicating among our residents, not just with the outside world, but among ourselves. So if that's the 7 items, how do we want to translate this into what NACRA could do to help? And individuals have walked up to me during the break and said, here's one way NACRA could do things. So this time I'm going to be strict. I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and I want specific ways that NACRA can address the top 7. So for example, the individual who came up to me and said, NACRA could, let me pick one. NACRA is already working on representation on boards and has generated model law proposals. Is there another way NACRA could do that? Perhaps by, somebody mentioned creating a document that would be useful to future residents, sponsored by NACRA, that says these are the things that you should be looking for when you go to a new community. Do you have representation on the board as being one of the items? So 10 minutes and come back with, your 2 or 3 3 proposals for specifics on what NAPRA can do. Okay? 10 minutes. It's 5 minutes to 11, and we're reporting back. And 5 minutes after 11, I'm coming back. Okay?
When she says she's coming back, she's coming back.
Right. So 2 to 3 things, focusing on any of the 7, but specifics to recommend to NAPRA for what they can do in this next year. Going from right to left, representation on boards, change in focus to assisted living, standardization to create comparability, the concern about financial resources of future residents, the effect on the culture of leading age leadership, have an effect on that culture. That's related to training of leadership in owners and managers. And then finally, how to be effective in communicating with among residents.
Everything that's circled in green.
Yeah, everything that's circled in green.
As far as I'm concerned, we don't have
Of course, let's start on the other time this time.
This is translated from Hebrew into English. Resident, apropos of education of executive directors, the need for our executive directors to move from the licensed nursing home administrator to a well-rounded resident engaging person. That NAPRA develops standards for selecting a CCRC. But no, not there. NAPRA develops standards for selecting the CCRC. And then here's the guerrilla warfare part of my thing is we can't say, we're going to go across the hall at lunch. Last year, we had a table like this, and in this luncheon, they're going to have an NAPRA or a leading age person at every table. Well, and they're going to do folk groups. What do you all think? And I think every one of us should say to that person, NAPRA is developing standards for selecting a CCRC. What are you at leading age doing to help us and help prospective residents do? Because you are the consumer engagement cabinet. That's their job for leading age, and we need to press them on that. But not just me press them, but we all in our informal conversations around tables say, what are you doing? Secondly, NAPRA needs to focus on the training and education of executive directors to engage residents and do that in a variety of ways. And again, at this table, when we're going across there and leading agents say, well, what's on your mind, Jack? You know, guess what? All 50 of us, or however many we are, say to them the same thing in different ways because we aren't getting through to them. I think that's the point. We are not getting through leading age. They are good people, they are decent people, but we're not seeing any kind of change in these 2 areas. So that was our 2 points.
Well, what was the second?
The second one, NAPRA is focusing on the education and training of executive directors to engage residents. And I think if we just keep going, we'll next step.
Bob, of that group that's working to engage residents, how many of them came to this session this morning?
Thank you very much for asking that. None. How many paid attention to what we said last year? Little. That's what I'm saying. It's like, you know, you've got to just keep saying it and doing it and showing it and writing it and bringing it up because it's a long haul. There is some hope, but it's not going to be easy.
Did they know about this session, Jack? Did they know about this session?
I'd like to pick up on what Bob said. I think the most important thing that NAPRA can do is to recognize. Okay, that better? Okay. All 25, 26 of these items are important. Their importance varies from one community to another. I get a little concerned. Oh, effectively following through if we take each item by item. What I am suggesting is we use our bargaining power, which is greater now than it has been for a long time. And that bargaining power is this. CCRCs are trying to reposition. You'll hear this for the next several days. Reposition to accommodate the next generation. And that is vitally important. It's important to us because if they fail in that mission, we're gone. We're done. What we should say to management, we understand that we're going to support you, but we're going to use our bargaining chip. There are some needs going on in our generation that you are not now fulfilling. We want you to meet those needs. And if you meet those needs, we will support you on your goal. And I think with that broad, comprehensive strategy, we can accomplish all of these things in a little bit more effective fashion.
Let me make, can you hear me okay? Let me make one observation, commentary. I was a participant a number of years ago that took the strategy that you just talked about. And if you look what's on the wall there in terms of leadership training and leadership education, it's been reflected both for NACRA as well as the leading edge. Here was the strategy that I was a part of. What we did was, we took the NACRA leadership and the leading edge leadership, and we trained the two of them together. In other words, we didn't train NACRA leadership. We trained the leadership who are really the powerful partners in the future that we're talking about. So we didn't separate them out. We made them learn from one another. And we trained them and brought experts and gave validation to both sides of the question, whether it was a provider issue or whether it was like the example I used in relationship to what happened at the Glebe. So we put a training program together for both, in this particular instance, NACRA and Leading Edge. Not Leading Edge's training program over here and NACRA's program over here, where we picked the strategic issues and we trained them together. I would just offer that as an observation.
Where
did this happen?
We did it on a national basis through services in the government. And I was one of 25 people who was a beneficiary.
Did it work?
It worked.
I'm delighted that something has worked. We need to stand up and cheer, right? But I think that there's no reason that model cannot be replicated. I mean, why is it that leaders of Leading Edge and NACRA don't attend a joint session? I mean, why does it make, why does there need to be this division? At our state level, I'm quite friendly with the president of Leading Edge New Jersey, and she always asks when Orange, that's our state organization, comes out with a study or something, she always says, Ellen, why don't you send me a report? And so I do, and then we discuss it. So, I find that there's a very easy, ongoing relationship. And by the way, that was very helpful when we passed our Bill of Rights that just recently happened. It was just signed by the government. But the point was we asked Leading Edge for input. And we asked the state regulator for input. We asked all kinds of people. And then we included those recommendations to a very large extent in our draft that went to the legislature. And I believe that if we hadn't done that, we might have had opposition from the providers, which is what happened to us when we first passed the mandate putting resident trustees on the boards. So this way we avoided that, and I think the political process worked much better because there was no organized opposition. We didn't get everything, but by God, we got about 80%. So I'd like to suggest that that be replicated in other places.
Ron, I'm having an attack. We have this leading age consumer cabinet, consumer engagement cabinet. They're going to have lunch across the hall. Our table asked, why aren't those people who were charged by leading age to engage consumers in this room with this outstanding program that's going on here? Because that's called engaging consumers. Well, they aren't here. But what Ron said might be something, no, I think it is something we should, NACRA could propose to the resident engagement, consumer engagement cabinet, that they sponsor and fund a training program for 24 resident leaders and 24 executive directors across the country as a model for leadership training in partnership one with the other, preparing for, as Moneybags said, for the next generation. How do we equip ourselves to engage residents as resident leaders and as providers for what's coming, and have a leading age training event that is jointly sponsored by us, paid for by them, that has 24 we could select the 24 leaders and 24 of them, and it would be interesting because what will come out of it is the collaboration. If you start telling people what to do, which I'm not against, but you do much better in learning together and saying, let the light come on.
Thank you, Bob. I thought I'd speak because I think, how many of the people here have ever gone through a provider training program? I think you have, okay. I thought I was the only one, so there are two of us. So that's what this CASP is. CASP is a certified aging services professional. It's a program to prepare people to be managers in this industry. It involves examinations. And it was started by Leading Age's predecessor organization some years ago. And it's the only program that's open to residents, which is why I went through it. Subsequently, there was difficulty because it was hard for the providers to prepare for those examinations. They wanted a program that was more what they called leadership oriented. So things like who moved my cheese. And so they started the Leadership Academy program. The CASP program goes through sort of the technology, how you do food service, how do you keep track of the assets of the organization, make sure that they don't walk off the premises, that sort of thing. And the Leading Age Leadership Academy is oriented more toward leadership as they see it, which is now, in moving forward, my experience has been, and talking with the people at Leading Age, they've confirmed it, there are virtually no residents who are interested in taking courses to prepare themselves to become the future leaders of the industry. They're just not ready at age 85 to go back to school and take examinations again. And so that becomes a major barrier. And so they've moved to this program, and in their Leadership Academy, it is closed to residents, they're not there. So the alternative would be to have some resident instructors. Wouldn't it be nice? I went to 2 of the summer institutes features of the CAST program, and the people who were there were, very favorably impressed. I was not allowed to be a speaker because I was a resident. But it was through that connection that Jennifer got connected to me, because Jennifer called a fellow student of mine who works for Leading Age in Texas, and she knew about NACRA because I'd been at this convention. So one of the things would be to not treat residents like inferiors. We might also be able to help them in looking at the mentality, and that gets at the core of this mentality issue, which we're all talking about. People are saying, gee, how do we make that change? Do we do it through leadership? Ron suggested a joint program. That means there has to be an openness to a joint program. It looks to me like it's going the other way.
I think we're to this table and this table. Either of these. We've got one right behind you, and then we're coming to you.
Excuse me. I'm going to do something that's the total flip side of what we're talking about. I appreciate the willingness of the leadership to talk about influencing leadership, but I'm going to say that one thing that NACRA might do would be to encourage members to join a web group, whether it be an email group or through the website, for an exchange of very simple, interesting, trivial ideas. For example, I asked, hey, you have the letters that indicate the tax deductibility, whether it's life care or modified fee for service, are those bills still going out because they did at my mother's modified fee for service? Because my executive director said that they had pretty much been discontinued across the industry. I went to a small group of NACRA email people, posed the question, and that gave me meat, M-E-A-T, to go back to my executive director and say, no, those letters are still very common. The more times you have residents being willing to challenge their local leadership, mentioning NACRA, then the more visible we become, as trivial as it may be. Like, what are you doing about golf cart parking? Or what about smoking inside or outside, or whatever it may be? Those might be of interest to a much more common strata of potential members, who then in turn, by just osmosis, through these exchanges, will see that, hey, there's some bigger fish out there, but in the meantime, I'm going to let my local management know that I've got a group behind me when I tell him or her we're currently looking for our third or fourth executive director in 3 years. I've got some meat behind me, and I can use the term NACRA, and they start listening. Then, as EDs, if they turn to their resource, which might be Leading Age, they can say, you know, I've got a group, I'm hearing from residents, and there's something called NACRA out there, where I'm hearing that I can't really pull the wool over the eyes of my residents like I used to be able to, and telling them, oh, those letters aren't done anymore. So I think NACRA can merely, without even involving Leading Age, can start this kind of grassroots exchange for those interested in doing it, get more membership at the same time, and then let the big issues bubble up. Jack Cumming was mentioning social media as being an alternative, the LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm more used to the email aspect, but that's something that NACRA might consider doing regardless of what Leading Age does.
Where's your microphone?
To add to that, I would comment that Leading Age does have a thing, I can't think of the name of the net that it's on, but it's a leading edge. Listserv, that's it. It has a listserv in which you can get involved and make comments on groups like that. And I do believe that is open to residents if they want to get onto that listserv. So that's one way we can get that started, is to promote that through listserv to our residents. The other idea that I wanted to suggest is that Leading Edge does have study groups and panels from time to time to look at specific issues. They don't normally ask for residents to be on those study groups panels, and we should promote the adding of residents to those study groups and panels.
On the issue of residents on boards, in the last 5 years, as I've been editor of Lifeline, I have published a series of articles on how certain organizations achieve adding residents to their board. I've had interviews with residents who have served as board members, and so on. I think we could develop an information piece that would summarize each of those articles and identify people who could serve as resources for people who are interested in pursuing this, because we've come a long way in the last 5 years in the number of places that have added residents to their boards, and I think that we're at the tipping point where the majority of places now do have residents on the board. Not all of them are voting representatives, but it is expanding tremendously. I think it would not be too hard to develop an information piece that would be available to people who are interested in pursuing this. By the same token, effective communication among residents. A number of resident groups do surveys periodically about what's working best and what is most valuable in their community for resident getting their information. And we could pull some of those together. We might even think about doing a national survey about what are the effective ways in your community for residents to get their information. And maybe at some point even develop a PowerPoint that would be portable.
I'd like to add to this suggestion, because it goes to the heart of what I've been thinking about. I think there's a lot happening in the country, including the residents on board and the different laws or ways that mechanisms that have been used to bring residents to the board. That's just one important subject. But if we had some central database that all of us who are looking to expand residents on the board, for instance, could address, could send requests to, find out what was happening in the rest of the country, I think that would be a big help. And this works not just with residents on the board, but for instance, we've just recently passed a Bill of Rights for independent living residents. And before we started that, I asked NACRA to give me information on bills of rights that all over the country, so that there would be some template that we could draw on. And I found that it was very, very spotty. In other words, the information I got didn't really give me much. And I think that this is not because there isn't a lot of information out there, but because it really hasn't been collected and put into a package so that it could be disseminated. I'd like to see NACRA do that.
What table was this? I had a question, Jack. Who was the sponsor and the financial underwriter of that training program that you went through?
The program, the CASP program, Certified Aging Services Professional, is part of the Coalition for Leadership in Aging Services, which was an organization formed by ASA, which is the predecessor organization to Leading Age. After Leading Age decided that that was not the way they wanted to go, they, I believe, spun it off to the University of North Texas at Denton, and they operate the program now. And you can take it completely online, or you can take it completely online and attend their summer institutes. They have summer institutes, which are highly to be recommended and very informative. And then subsequently, Leading Age still speaks positively of the certified program, which involves examinations, but they've subsequently started their Leadership Academy program. And that consists of fellows. They have to be sponsored by their employer. The employer puts up the money for it, and they pay their travel costs. And of course, that means that it's closed to residents, even though we sort of provide the funds, I guess, but it's not resident oriented, it's oriented toward providers.
You know, there is a mechanism under Leading Age by which they do scholarships and grants under Leading Age, and you have to be a member of Leading Age, and I assume that NACRA is a member of Leading Age, and so would qualify for grants or scholarships. I mean, I know I applied for one year, and they said, no, you can't do it because you aren't a member of Leading Age. And I was proposing to look at CCRCs as a grant topic from a resident rights perspective, but I couldn't do it because I'm not a member of Leading Age. But you could turn that around and see if there wasn't a way for NAPRA to get dollars to support a specific study or a specific plan or a specific document that you were interested in. Because at least you're a member, so they have to at least to let you apply.
We're not a member.
You're not a member. Okay.
We're not a member. We did apply this year. We thought maybe as...
Oh, that's right. That's where the issue is.
We prepared a grant proposal.
Right.
And we sent it in. And I forget now exactly what it was, but it was a well thought out proposal. And with a timeline, etc. And we thought that even though we're not permitted to be a member organization because we're a resident organization, that they might make an exception in our case. And we never had any acknowledgement whatsoever for that submission. Not anything. So we assumed we had evidence that they received it, but they never responded one way or another. And we didn't receive the grant. I was an individual member for many years, and as an actuary, and when they found that I was a resident, my membership was dropped.
Well, this does kind of flow back to Leading Age appeared at the spring meeting in Florida, and I think that was maybe a first, wasn't it? Three people from Leading Age, and they were proposing that NAPRA become a member of Leading Age. And I think we started the discussion then, but it's interesting how many of the action items, focus on Leading Age as the industry representative from the provider side. And it sounds to me like maybe what you're talking about is coming closer to making the decision to be a member of Leading Age, if that would give you a greater voice. I mean, it's always that question of, do they co-opt you by you being a member, and therefore you just become a very nice prisoner, or is it an effective tool? And I'm hearing that this is a real action item for NAPRA this next year. That's my outsider perspective, listening, to everyone. Yeah. Okay, so it's underway as a discussion action item.
The listserv that he mentioned, leading age, is that for the public or leading age members?
Public.
The public? Okay.
I think that if, you know, I was speaking for leading age rather than NACRA, that I would say that leading age is a trade organization. And it's a trade organization made up of providers. And if they ever accepted people who are residents or people who are receivers, you know, this would be a real exception. Because like I say, it's a trade organization. It's leading age used to be the American Association of Homes and Services for the Aging. And now it's international and it's leading age, but it's still a trade organization.
But as with many trade organizations, this is part of that whole question about transitioning for the future. Trade organizations have recognized that they have a limited ability to have a voice themselves if they are denied access to the people they're serving in their trade organization. Yes. What? The consumer. Yes, the consumer, right.
In our membership drive, could someone clarify who can be a member of NACRA since we are to recruit at this convention? Would we accept someone from leading age to be our member? And if we have or will, then let's point that out as we try to become a member of them.
I've got a membership answer. We have a member, the CEO of Leading Age Paramedics is a life member of NACRA. Any provider can be a member of NACRA. Last year, in a room like this in the corner, I had a cardiac experience with the executive director who followed the guy that was fired, said to him, "Bob, I want to apologize for the leadership that you had here, and you're sorry you left, and here's $150 to give you back." That's called Presbyterian penance plan. But so any provider, and you'll notice in the recruitment letter that I've given you, it's dear provider and resident. It's for both, and they can be members. They just are not right at this point eligible to be on the board. But one thing I want all of you to say, promise me you'll say whenever you see a leading age staff member or board member, we, the residents of the CCRCs, have made leading age possible and this meeting possible by our entry fees and our monthly fees, which our communities pay to you to do this. And Jack can say this even more eloquently than I can when he said at the workshop, we had 240 people here in Denver at the workshop on what providers can learn from CCRC residents. And Jack introduced something by saying, "I'm staying in a flea bag motel 25 miles out of town while you guys stay in the downtown Hilton at my expense." It was about that straight, wasn't it, Jack?
Yes.
I'm embarrassed. Mariana says I was too frank. I'm a New Yorker.
But the point is, we are in this with them, and they would not be here without us. We are in this with them, and they would not be here without us. And we've got to say that again and again to every person, every board member, every staff member, again and again, to set the stage for what's going to be the next chapter.
If you look at my sign, it says, NACRA exists for the purpose of promoting, supporting, and protecting the chosen lifestyle of continuing care community residents in the United States. Anybody who wants to support this lifestyle is welcome and invited to join. We even have prospective residents. We have parents. And we certainly have a number of leading age staff members, some of whom are life members. A.B. Powell, who's an actuary, who does the actuarial work or a lot of the southern CCRCs, is a life member of NACRA.
One of the observations that I would give back to you, standing on the outside looking in, there's two things jump out at me. One is, maybe NACRA needs to be more assertive. Maybe we should ask ourselves, have we been too passive? The second thing that occurs to me is we haven't integrated ourselves, either because someone didn't want us, but we haven't found out what the strategies are to get on the inside. So we got to work cut out for us. There's no question about it.
I'd just like to offer a thought about the relationship between NACRA and leading age. It seems to me that there's a broad agenda where NACRA and leading age have congruent goals, and that we should be able to amicably work in partnership with them to advance those goals. But it seems to me that inevitably there is also an agenda which will be very important to residents, where we will not find sympathy in leading age. I don't think leading age in general will jump on the bandwagon readily to have residents on boards of directors. As has been said earlier, leading age is a trade association of providers, and we are an association of consumers. And to imagine that we could be sort of absorbed, you might say, by NACRA, would be like Consumers Union being absorbed by the National Association of Manufacturers. It simply wouldn't make any sense. In order for our recommendations and our policy decisions to have credibility with residents, it seems to me, we have to have an independent stance from leading age. And we shouldn't regret that. We should welcome it. We should work with them collegially when our agendas coincide, and we should have the ability to have our independent point of view and our independent program where that is necessary, and it definitely will be necessary in some instances.
Over here.
This is somewhat saying the obvious, but I'm here not only as past president of NACRA, I'm here through the generosity of leading age waiving the registration fee for all NACRA members. Doesn't that say a great deal as to what leading age is trying to communicate to us?
I've been to the fall meetings and the spring meetings of NACRA, not every one. But this is the first one I've been to that didn't have somebody from leading age here and leading some things, some section. I think last year there was, and we had the Jane Fonda. Yeah. So this is the first time I have seen NACRA have a meeting that didn't have leading age or American Association of Homes and Services for the Aging people at their meeting as a speaker or as a program presenter.
But that will be part of this afternoon's program, won't it? Yeah. In fact, maybe we're really at the point now, let me just step over here to the microphone. We're really at the point now, because I see Ruth edging her way forward, and she'll take the microphones out of our hands shortly. We're really at the point now where we're wrapping up the morning session, and we now go to lunch together. That's going to be next door, if I'm not mistaken. And does it start at 12, or does it start at 12 o'clock? So we had agreed we'd stop about 4 till 12. And then this afternoon, there's the joint session that's open to everybody. And then this afternoon at 3 o'clock or 3:30? 3:30? 3:30 will be a further session And why don't you describe a little bit of that before we go? You're on this one, Ron? Yes.
I'm going to be the facilitator, and this is basically provider, and resident talking about engagement. That's the focus. We've had part of that conversation here, and that's what's going to be there. And we're going to take the same format, what they're going to do. Ellen is going to present, for example, engagement, for example, with the providers and leading ages. She's already shared with you how that came about and how that was instrumental in the past the residents' rights legislation. So she's going to be one of those members. And then the two other members come from the same basic managed facility. One is a resident and one is a chief operating officer. But that's the thrust of the center.
And is that in this room or a different room? C-148. So that's a different room. C-148 at 3:30 today.
C-138. C as in cat, 148. C as in cat, 148.
And finally, as from my perspective, what I will be doing as a way to follow up from today's meeting is I'll be trying to capture as much of this as I can on my Elder Law Prof blog. And anybody who's interested, that's open forum. You can go in, you can add comments. It's a little tricky to add the comment. I always recommend that you write out your comment in a Word perfect document, paste it and paste it in as the comment, because sometimes the comment function shuts down before you can hit send. And then shortly, I get notices when people have put in comments, and I go in and make them active one by one. You can also subscribe to the blog if you want to, if you don't want to check it regularly, and it will send you an email only when there's something on the blog to look at. So that's another way in which we can share information, and I know that people from Leading Age also read that.
I don't blog, so what do I do to find it?
To find it, the easy way to find it is to actually go to my University, Penn State University website, and if you look for my name, Catherine Pearson, you can find what's called a profile. It's a biography of me. And at the very top of my profile, it says Elder Law Prof, and you hit that, and it will take you directly to the blog. And then once you're there, you can just save it. It's just, a blog is nothing other than a website. You know, it's a continuing diary.
www.what?
www.pennstate.law.
This is a tremendously positive service that Catherine Pearson has taken on for the entire industry. She does effectively a daily column of news, daily. And it's a tremendous undertaking, and I think we should give her
from Stetson University, who is a true genius in elder law generally, law and aging, all law and aging issues. She's really one of the key persons in law and aging at Stetson University. And Stetson University would be a natural partner for a lot of this as well. And since the three of us have joined together, we're getting about 1,000 hits a day, 1,000 people looking at it a day. And what we would love to do is get more subscribers, because the subscribers generate the real key reporting numbers, because it tells you it's somebody who's not just looking at it casually, they're looking at it, you know, with the future in mind. So, good. Thanks, everybody. So,
thank you so much, Catherine and Ron. This has just been a wonderful session, and we're going to take these charts and we're going to translate some of it so we can get it out to you all. I took voluminous notes. I know Jack has it all on film, so we'll put it together so that everybody will have an opportunity to share in this. And also, those people who were not able to
Very quickly now, we're going to break, and luncheon is right next door for the residents. At the conclusion of the luncheon, and we're going to make our way to the opening session of the Leading Age program, which will be somewhere down that way. And Amy Mullins will be the keynote speaker. I know that there's supposed to be special seating for us way up front for the opening session, so I'm going to check with the governor, or we'll check with the lady next door to find out how we make our way into that special seating. And there's one more thing I want to bring to your attention. Leading Age has been very, very kind, and they have comped a booth for us in the exhibition hall, because so many times I've talked to people, I say, I go from NAGRA, they say, what's that? Well, we thought a couple of years ago it would be a good idea to be in the exhibition booth, and we are kind of strategically placed so that people going to luncheon, and everybody has great appetites, will pass by our booth, and so we can get our advertisement in there. And we've got a lot of literature and some things to share with people. So I want you to try to visit us. We are in, what's the name? Our booth number is 3545. And we have a beautiful picture of Niagara, and it was given to us, comped us by Leading Age, and it is beautiful. So when you wait lunch tomorrow, find it at 3545, and we'll be there. We'll be tending the booth. Look forward to meeting and greeting. And I just want to also, one little ad. Next April is our annual meeting, and it is going to be held at Stonebridge CCRC in Mystic, Connecticut, and that's my home. And so there's a lot of literature in the back about Mystic, all the things that you can do and see. We've been working with motels and hotels in addition to the guest facilities that are right at Stonebridge, so that we can accommodate all of our guests, and everybody's very excited about this possibility. And so around circa April 10, 11, 12, and that's before the Sunday after we are done will be Palm Sunday, Passover's later, so I think we've got a good time here for people to come and see the beauty of spring in Connecticut. So, and also next year, the Leading Age next meeting is in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's going to be October 14th, or about the 20th or so of October next year. So there are all kinds of exciting things happening. We're so delighted you're here, and I know I'm very excited for the presentation this afternoon with Ron and his crew. So thank you so much for coming. There's literature in the back, and we just look forward to seeing you throughout the course of this conference. And Ron, thank you so much, Mary and Catherine. You're wonderful. Thank you.